So why don't you settle your ass at the motel and I'll do what I do best.
And I don't give a rat's ass whether you like it or not. You try going after this guy alone, and your ass will be in jail so fast your head will spin. Is any of this getting through to you, Mr. Knox?
Guys, welcome to a classic movie review of 1988's Deadly Pursuit, starring Sidney Poitier, Tom Berenger and Kirstie Alley. Now, this was directed by Roger Spottiswoode. It's a manhunt thriller that sees a murderer infiltrate a hiking group and attempt to vanish into the wilderness. Now, hot on his trail, though, is an FBI agent who's out of his depths in the mountains and a grumpy tracker with a personal score to settle. Now, for anyone watching on the other side of the Atlantic, this was named Shoot to Kill in the US, which is nowhere near as cool a title as Deadly Pursuit. But anyway, this was Sidney Poitier's return to acting after an 11-year break and captured Tom Berenger in that post-Platoon, pre-Major League stardom. Now, Deadly Pursuit's a VHS era favourite of mine, despite it having more than a few issues. The sheer fun of it all, though, makes this an 80s classic for me, so let's take a look. So, Deadly Pursuit is a formulaic thriller, I'll admit that much. A mismatched pair of good guys, a psycho loony, a kidnapped female character. It ticks all of the boxes of those last-minute Friday night video store rentals. May they rest in peace. But wait a minute, isn't that Sidney Poitier? Oscar, BAFTA and Golden Globe winner and one of Hollywood's greats, arguing with a horse?
Posse. Home. Home!
And isn't that Tom Berenger, fresh off a Golden Globe win and an Oscar nomination for Platoon a year or two earlier, before he vanished into straight-to-video land? And how come this all looks so good? Is the cinematography by the same Mark Chapman who shot Taxi Driver, Invasion of the Body Snatchers and Raging Bull? Yeah. And so what we ultimately have is a revenge, thriller, manhunt, wilderness, survival hybrid. And squint and you'll see where some of 1993's cliffhanger came from. Now, here we have a failed hostage negotiation that comes to a tragic end for FBI investigator Warren Stantin, played by Sidney Poitier, and the lawman chases his perpetrator to the ruggedy but spectacular Pacific Northwest on the American side of the Canadian border. Now, needing help traversing the landscape, Poitier requests the help of the reclusive mountain man Jonathan Knox, played here by Tom Berenger.
Get out of my way.
You're under arrest.
Bullshit.
You have the right to remain silent. Move.
And, wouldn't you know it, Berenger's girlfriend Sarah, played by Kirstie Alley, is a hiking guide taking a group on trail into the wilderness, and one of her party is the killer. Whew. So, Deadly Pursuit is a good film. It's not a great one. And ever since I first watched this over 30 years ago, a few things have always niggled me, and I'll chat about them now to get them out of the way. And the first thing is that we initially have this mysterious unseen villain, an antagonist whose voice we only get to hear in the opening hostage scenes.
Mrs. Bridger's Mercedes is parked in the driveway. Stock it with one police radio and a pair of handcuffs, or I promise you this woman's dead in 1 minute.
Then we know that he's one of Kirstie Alley's tour group. Now, for me, this is the unique selling point of the movie, the game of who's who. Now, the movie does throw up some good teases and red herrings, but the identity of the killer is revealed a little bit too early for me. A bit more guesswork on our part would have been great, but hey-ho.
Hey, Sarah, when are we going to come across a radio that works?
What was wrong with the radio the last time?
It was busted.
What do you need a radio for?
Weather forecast.
And also, now be careful to avoid spoilers here, but the final act of the movie dispenses with the wilderness setting for a generic hostage shootout, which is a real shame in my opinion. So much work has been done up to that point to conjure a sense of isolation in the wilderness, and that moment that our characters stumble out of the tree line and onto a road is quite jarring. I'd have preferred Poitier and Berenger to take down their prey surrounded by the stunning cliffs, rivers and trees of the Canadian wilderness. But alas, these are my personal nitpicks, and as I mentioned, this is good old action thriller fun that takes itself seriously when it has to, but also isn't afraid to wander into a bit of silliness, especially when it needs to break the tension between Poitier and Berenger. Now, speaking of the lead pair, they do make an interesting partnership. Poitier's FBI man, clearly far too used to the city life to deal with the great outdoors, and Berenger, too impatient and bent on the rescue of his girl to want him tagging around. But the pair need each other, especially during a standout set piece featuring a gorge crossing and one of those great practical bits of stunt work, the kind that didn't and couldn't rely on CGI for its sense of peril. And the movie's good at building up that kind of suspense with its device of cutting back and forth between the two trackers and the hikers. If you've not seen the film or you haven't seen it for many years, you can have a bit of fun trying to guess which hiker is the killer, as they all have their moment of suspicion. Now, I feel like this was Kirstie Alley's first big movie, first big film role, and I know that people may argue that it was 6 years previous to this in Star Trek The Wrath of Khan, but this is her first meaty role, if you like. I think she'd already been in Cheers for about a year here, but I could be wrong about that. And she'd become really famous, obviously, for Cheers and for the Look Who's Talking movies. She at least makes quite a feisty damsel in distress here.
Ow, damn, ow.
What happened?
I don't know, it's my leg.
Now, Deadly Pursuit is competently directed by Roger Spottiswoode, who made the very good war journalist drama Under Fire, and Turner and Hooch, and Air America, but would go on to make a pretty naff comedy with Stallone, Stop or My Mum Will Shoot, also a pretty naff Bond film in Tomorrow Never Dies, and a pretty naff Schwarzenegger film in The Sixth Day. This is one of his better efforts for sure. He has some great acting talent at his disposal and some stunning locations to point his camera at. Now, Deadly Pursuit may not go down in the action movie Hall of Fame, but trust me, it can be extremely refreshing to watch a genre film like this without the exhausting, plasticky looking CGI spectacles of later years. Real exteriors, real stunt work, and real movie stars. Now, we can be honest, would an FBI agent and a civilian be allowed to chase after a dangerous killer through the wilderness all by themselves? It's doubtful, to say the least. But this kind of filmmaking does make me nostalgic about the 80s, an era where these kind of movies were in constant supply, it seemed. So Deadly Pursuit is pretty much forgotten about today, and is quite underrated overall. However, it is well worth a watch for any fans of well-made action thrillers, and it's the only place in the history of the movies that you get to see Sidney Poitier and a grizzly bear having a shouting contest. Go check it out.